This is the story of the original Galimir Quartet that was comprised of 4 siblings born and educated in Vienna who went on to have an international touring and recording career that ended with the growing anti-Semitism and rise of the Nazis. This short biopic was created to accompany the world premiere of Voyage for a String Quartet, a string quartet by Ellen Taft-Zwillig for the St. Lawrence Quartet, commissioned in honor of the 100th anniversary of the Galimir's birth. The eldest, Marguerite, who was the cellist, was born in 1905. Next came René, the violist, who was born in 1908, followed by Felix, the first violinist, who was born in 1910, and Adrienne, the second violinist, who was born in 1912. The first 3 were born at the family home on Taborstrasse in Vienna's 2nd district. By the time Adrienne was born, obstetric practice had changed, and she was born in the hospital. Vienna was the imperial seat of the Austro-Hungarian Empire and was a major cultural center of Europe. It was a city of literature, art, and music, and also the home to some of Europe's brightest thinkers. The composers and musicians who made Vienna their home in the 18th and 19th century defined classical music that to this day is enjoyed by audiences worldwide. Momentous transformations in classical music began in the late 19th century and continued into the 20th, giving birth to what we now call the Second Vienna School. It is this incredibly rich cultural and artistic milieu that formed the background of the Galimir's childhood and adolescence. Their Vienna stretched from the Jewish 2nd district with its incredible Sephardic temple on Zirkusgasse and their home on Taborstrasse across the Donau Canal, to the Stern School that they attended and to the Opera House, and further on to the Neues Wiener Konservatorium and the Musikverein, where they learned their art and had many of their Vienna performances. The Taborstrasse house, where they grew up, was like many of the fin de siècle apartment houses in Vienna. The grain exchange, where many of their maternal relatives were traders, was just down the street. Café society flourished in the city, but Jewish patrons tended to gather in their own cafes for stimulating discussions and entertainment. The Galimir's maternal family, Russo, had lived in Vienna as far back as the beginning of the 19th century and was prominent in the Sephardic community. Their father was born in Romania and was in the textile business and worked as an international representative of the major textile firms headquartered in and around Vienna. His family, also Sephardic, can be traced back to the beginning of the 19th century with branches of the family in Romania and Bulgaria. The Galimirs lived a typical Jewish middle-class life and were exposed to all the culture that Vienna had to offer. Like many Jewish children, the Galimirs attended a private school as public elementary schools were deemed too rough for Jewish children. At the outbreak of the First World War, because their father was a Romanian, they were considered enemy aliens and barred for a while from attending school, and so took lessons at home. Eventually, they were permitted to return to school. The Stern school that they all attended was primarily a girls' school, but enrolled a few boys at the elementary grade level. This school was part of a network founded by women that played an important role in turn-of-the-century educational reform. These schools opened up educational opportunities for girls, resulting in many more young women completing gymnasium or high school and going on to the university. The curricula of the schools not only included the traditional focus on arts and languages, but also mathematics and sciences. The Stern School, like many of these schools, offered music, and some of its teachers were connected to the conservatory. Going to concerts and the opera was also part of the curriculum. For a time, some of the girls may have also attended the Schwarzwald School, whose teachers included architect Alfred Loos, composer Arnold Schoenberg, and painter Oskar Kokoschka. The Galimir home was filled with music. Their mother, Elsa, played the piano, and all 4 children received their first music lessons at home from family friend Nellie Popper. Marguerite studied the piano, and the other three first learned to play the violin. Felix started off at the Stern school with his sisters, but because he was the boy in the family, he then was sent to the more traditional Gymnasium. When he was 12, he also began his studies at the Neues Wiener Conservatorium with Adolf Bach, and later studied with Karl Flesch in Baden-Baden. In 1927, Vienna was preparing to celebrate the centennial of Beethoven's death, and every school wanted to participate with a student concert. The Galimirs were pressed into action, but had to transform themselves from one pianist and three violinists into a string quartet. Marguerite took up the cello, and René switched to the viola. Their performance of Opus 18 No. 4 was apparently a success at both the girls' school and at Felix's Gymnasium. So much so that they began to study chamber music seriously with Schumann Pullman at the conservatory. They all completed their studies at the conservatory even as they began to perform professionally. The youngest, Adrienne, was only 16 when they began to concertize. By the spring of 1930, they were playing at a sufficiently high level that they were included in the regular chamber music concerts of the students of Schumann Pullman. At this concert, they performed the Korngold String Quartet Opus 16. It is clear from their earliest concerts that in addition to playing the standard 18th and 19th century chamber music repertoire, they were immersed in the work of major composers who made up the Second Vienna School. At one of their earliest concerts as a professional ensemble in March of 1931, they again played the Korngold Opus 16 String Quartet as well as quartets by Mozart and Brahms. They continued their studies with Pullman and began their deep involvement with the Ravel String Quartet that they first performed at a public concert in May 1931. In addition to their instrumental and quartet studies at the conservatory, they performed with a number of ensembles in Vienna, including the newly founded Wiener Kammerorchester, in which the Galimir Quartet were the principal players. Barely out of their teens, they began to tour internationally and had the support of a string manufacturer. Their early professional publicity cards included their endorsement of the company's steel and gut strings. In early 1932, the Galimirs performed the Ravel Quartet at a concert in Vienna in honor of Maurice Ravel. The reviewer commented that Ravel was astounded by their performance of his rarely heard work. As these pages from René Galimir's Austrian passport show, they traveled all over Europe and the Middle East. Remarkably, we have a record of many of their concerts in the reviews, which were meticulously collected and assembled by Moscow Galimir in a series of albums. we know that he often traveled with them and took great pride in their successes. Along with each review, he indicated the date and location of the concert and often underlined particular lines in the reviews. While at some point, he clearly thought that Felix would eventually become a businessman like himself, and insisted that Felix's education included gymnasium as well as studies at the conservatory, it is clear that without a supportive family, the four Galimirs might never have achieved the success that they did. The value Moscow placed on the careers of his children is attested to by the fact that he continued up to the time of his death to keep reviews of their concerts and photographs in his wallet. They performed regularly in Italy, playing works by Haydn, Opus 77, Beethoven, Opus 74, Schubert's Quartet No. 14, Death and the Maiden, as well as Debussy's String Quartet, Opus 10. They played many concerts in Strasbourg, including concerts of new music organized by Hermann Scherchen. These concerts included a wide range of chamber music, not just string quartets. At one concert, they played a quartet by Sim Dresden, and René played the Fantasy Sonata for viola and harp by Arnold Bax. The reviews speak to the quality of the ensemble playing. One reviewer called their performance of Szymanowski's Opus 37 an artistic success. In Vienna, like the other parts of the cultural life, were dutifully chronicled in reviews written by members of the intellectual establishment like Hermann Wittgenstein. The Galimirs were quickly gaining a reputation for playing what was considered new and difficult music, like the Szymanowski Opus 37 Quartet, as well as works of Beethoven and Tchaikovsky. The Galimir Quartet brought technical skill and musicality to their performance, wrote the reviewer for the Neues Wiener Journal. The importance of the Viennese concert scene is in part attested to by the reviews of concerts in the foreign press. This 1934 review in the Christian Science Monitor covers a concert honoring Webern on his birthday. The concert was sponsored by the Viennese section of the International Society for Contemporary Music. The reviewer, Erwin Stein, states, "The performers were mostly young musicians who triumphantly mastered their difficult tasks. It was a pleasure to see with what understanding and ease the violinist Dea Gomrich, the singer Ian Mikalski, and particularly the Galimir Quartet played this music which to the former generation had offered almost insoluble problems. The technical difficulties are certainly no less great, but they are more easily mastered because the young people of today already feel what Webern wishes to say through his music." The quartet made a Middle East tour in 1934 and played a number of concerts in Palestine. The reviewer for the Palestine Post, the forerunner of the Jerusalem Post, wrote glowingly of their program and performance, as well as the audience's response, which required the playing of an encore. Like most of their programs, they gave the audience the classics and the contemporary. On this program, they paired Mozart's Dissonant Quartet, number 19, Koelschel 465, with the Szymanowski Quartet, Opus 37, and Schubert's Death and the Maiden. The reviewer wrote, "The quartet is probably one of the best and certainly one of the most fiery of any existing today." From Palestine, they went to Egypt where they played a number of concerts, including a performance of the Debussy Quartet, sponsored by Betsy Strauss, the wife of the Austrian consul. The reviewer spoke of their performance of new works like the Szymanowski as having ardor and conviction. In the summer of 1934, the quartet went to Paris to record Ravel's string quartet for the Polydor Decca label. The success of this youthful quartet derives from their ability to make this music come to life. It is remarkable that Marguerite, who only took up the cello when she was 22, would in 7 years come to the level of mastery noted in so many reviews. Their recording won the Grand Prix du Disque. In November of 1934, they made a major tour of Spain. At a concert sponsored by the Musical Association of Tortosa, they played Beethoven's Opus 18 No. 3, Schumann's Opus 41 No. 3, and Debussy's Opus 10. The reviews, as always, were glowing and referred to the Galimirs as one of the major ensembles of their generation in the world of music. They performed in Valencia along with Misha Elman, and then went on to play in Barcelona. Again, the reviewers were impressed with the musicality of their performances. After their tour of Spain, they went on to play a series of concerts in France. In Strasbourg, they paired the Beethoven and Schumann with Glazunov's Opus 70 No. 5. The reviewer not only commented on the quality of their interpretations, but with their ability to make contemporary music accessible. Lest one think that they only played quartets, their concert in Saint-Marie-sur-Mine showed that they had, by 1934, mastered a wide repertoire, from Steffani's work for 2 violins, cello, and organ, to Handel's Salve Regina for soprano and strings. Their concert concluded with a contemporary piece for soprano, chorus, and string quartet by Caplet, a friend of Debussy's. Back in Vienna, they performed Berg's Lyric Suite, which was recognized by the reviewer as one of the major works of the Second Vienna School. The reviews called it a fantastic performance of the Lyric Suite by the Galimir Quartet. In April, they provided the Vienna audiences with a new music concert that included Hindemith's Opus 32 No. 4, Zemlinsky's Opus 19 No. 3, Stravinsky's Concertino for String Quartet, and Janáček's Quartet No. 2, Intimate Letters. The audience gave the quartet and Zemlinsky, who attended the concert, a rousing standing ovation. Among the many concerts they performed in Austria and Germany, they also performed concerts at Jewish musical societies. In October 1935, they performed at a subscription concert at the Jüdischer Musikverein in Breslau, then part of Germany. The reviewer noted how unusual it was for women to be players in a world-class quartet. The program included the Brahms A minor, Schubert's Death and the Maiden, and Respighi's Il Tramonto for mezzo-soprano and quartet. The quartet received a rousing response from the audience and played the minuet from Mozart's E-flat Quartet, No. 16, Kochel 428, as an encore. In November of 1935, they traveled to Paris to record Darius Milhaud's Quartet No. 7. The composer participated in the recording process. In 1935, they recorded Berg's Lyric Suite for Polydor. By this point, they had, through their association with Berg, come to know the piece deeply and played it many times in Vienna and on tour. In April of 1936, they returned to Barcelona to participate in the 14th International Barcelona Music Festival. In addition to the festival concerts, they did a live radio broadcast. Their concerts included the Adagio from Schoenberg's Third Quartet, a song cycle by Egon Velez based on poetry by Elizabeth Barrett Browning, and American composer Mark Brunswick's two movements for string quartet. The reviewer wrote of the Galimirs' performance, "They played the Brunswick with a total understanding of the work and a perfect blend of technique and style." In May of 1936, they participated in a concert in Paris dedicated to Alban Berg, who had died the previous year. The concert included the Lyric Suite and his string quartet Opus 3, along with his Opus 1 piano sonata and his 7 early songs. The Galimirs had a long working relationship with Berg, and they played his Lyric Suite as often as they could. The concert and accompanying radio broadcasts were most favorably reviewed by the composer Darius Milhaud. Their recording of Berg's Lyric Suite received repeated and glowing reviews in Le Disque. Gramophone also gave the recording of the Lyric Suite an extensive and very laudatory review. The Galimir Quartet played the work to admiration. The technical difficulties are tremendous, but they make one feel throughout the inevitability of the widely leaping plastic melodies of the polyphony and the harmony. Their rhythmic sense is vital, and they give full value to the many expressive and dramatic passages in the various movements. They interpret the composer's directions with extraordinary care and reverence, and it would be hard to imagine a better performance. When the recording was reissued, it won the 1991 Gramophone Award. The recording of the Lyric Suite continued to receive very positive reviews that not only identified the work as a major 20th century work, but that also praised the Galimir Quartet's performance. The performance by the Galimir Quartet, whose members are hardly more than children, suggests that the modern Viennese infant must acquire the Schoenbergian language at its mother's knee. And the Galimir Quartet, the four siblings, have realized for this difficult work a miracle of homogeneity, of comprehension, depth, and love. The spring of 1936 brought Felix a successful audition and offer of a permanent position in the Vienna Philharmonic. Unfortunately, between the time of his audition in the spring and the beginning of the fall season, pressure from the Nazis led the orchestra management to withdraw the job offer. Felix tried desperately to have someone intervene on his behalf, but in the end came to realize that he would not have a career in Vienna. In November of 1936, the Galimirs played their last concert in Vienna, attended by the elite of the Viennese concertgoers. The concert was reviewed not only in the Vienna press, but also in the Stockholm Daily. They played quartets by Haydn, Beethoven, Smetana, and of course an encore of the Andante Amoroso from the Berg's Lyric Suite. The Viennese reviewer concluded that the Galimirs were already a link in the chain of the great Vienna quartet tradition from Joachim to Rosé and Kolisch. After their last concert in Vienna, they went to Paris, where they gave their last performance and radio broadcast as a quartet. Milhaud participated in that broadcast. Here, too, audiences and reviewers recognized the remarkable talent of these four siblings. Their performance at a house concert in 1935 of the Berg Lyric Suite had led the American violinist Louis Krasner to not only commission Berg to write a violin concerto, but also woo the quartet's second violinist. Louis and Adrienne were married in Vienna and moved to the United States in 1936 after the quartet's final concerts in Paris. The Sephardic temple where they were married was destroyed by the Nazis on the infamous Kristallnacht in 1938. The Galimir's mother, Elsa Russo-Galimir, had died in 1935. Moscow Galimir had the foresight to see that the anti-Semitism in Vienna would only get worse, and so left for Paris, where he and Marguerite would live till some time after the Nazis occupied Paris. Marguerite continued studies in French at the Sorbonne and gave French lessons to German officers who obviously did not suspect that she was a Jew. But as always prescient, Moscow secured travel papers difficult for a stateless Romanian and his daughter that allowed them to travel south through France. In Bordeaux, with the assistance of the Portuguese consul Aristides Sousa Mendes, he secured the necessary visas that allowed them to cross Spain into Portugal in 1940-41, where they awaited papers secured by the Krasners that would eventually allow them to cross the Atlantic. In the face of the inevitable tragedy about to envelop the Jews of Europe, the renowned violinist Bronislaw Huberman took it upon himself to rescue the very best Jewish musicians. He raised funds to form a new orchestra in Palestine and convinced Arturo Toscanini to conduct the inaugural concerts. He auditioned musicians from all over Europe and arranged for all the necessary exit permits and visas to allow the musicians and family members to immigrate to Palestine, then a British protectorate. Felix and René were selected, offered contracts, and played in the newly created Palestine Symphony Orchestra. These musicians brought the best traditions of European music to Palestine and gave not only orchestra performances, but also chamber music concerts and music instruction to children. In 1948, with the creation of the State of Israel, the orchestra was renamed the Israel Philharmonic Orchestra. Without this opportunity to come to Palestine, many of Europe's finest musicians would have perished. The story of Bronislaw Huberman and the founding of the Palestine Symphony Orchestra is beautifully told in Josh Aronson's film, Orchestra of Exiles. Felix was able to come to the US in 1938 with the help of the Krasners and soon was engaged to play in Toscanini's MBC orchestra. Renee stayed in Palestine and performed with the PSO and played in the Bernstein Quartet till 1944, when she married Walter Hertig and settled in Cairo. The Hertigs had to leave Cairo in 1948 when the State of Israel received its independence and went first to Holland, where they attempted to get visas that would allow them to settle somewhere. They immigrated to Israel, where Walter died in 1949. Renee and her children eventually made it to the United States in 1952 after a stay in Cuba, where they waited for visas that would allow them to have permanent residency in the United States. Reunited in the U.S. after Renee and her children immigrated in 1952, the Galimirs were close, but never again played together as a quartet. Renee and Felix did play together for a short time in the reconstituted Galimir Quartet, but it was not the same as in Europe. Felix, Renee, and Adrienne continued to play music to the end of their lives. Marguerite shifted gears on arriving in the U.S. and for the rest of her life designed costume jewelry. Renee died first in 1973. She played concerts and taught in New York right up till 1 month before she died. Marguerite died in 1985, having been reasonably successful in her new career. Adrienne and Louis spent many years in Syracuse, where Louis took a faculty position after years of concertizing. They played together, and Adrienne continued to play quartets after they retired and moved to Boston. Music was her lifeblood. Remarkably, even when she was in great pain and had difficulty moving about, she came to life when she sat down to play quartets. Adrienne died in 1997. Felix had the most successful career, though not the one he had dreamt of when he was 26 and about to take his place as a permanent member of the Vienna Philharmonic. He played in Toscanini's MBC Orchestra and was concertmaster of its successor, the Symphony of the Air. But chamber music was in his blood, and he will be best remembered for his long association with the Marlborough Music Festival and his role as a teacher and coach at Juilliard, Curtis, and Mannes, where he too taught right up to his death in 1999. The Galimirs survived the Holocaust because of their music. Had they not become a string quartet and simply continued to live the lives of middle-class Jews in Vienna, they would have perished, as did so many. Many of their relatives perished. The success of the Galimir Quartet and their championing of the music of Berg, Schoenberg, Webern, Ravel, and Debussy brought them to Louis Krasner, who married Adrienne and was able, as an American, to bring her to the U.S. when immigration was already very difficult. Felix and Renee had the opportunity to receive contracts to play in the Palestine Symphony Orchestra and as such gain the necessary paperwork to make it safely out of Europe. Their career as a quartet was cut far too short by the storm clouds of World War II. We can only imagine what might have been had they continued to play in Europe. In addition to the millions of people he slaughtered, Hitler destroyed the intellectual milieu that made Vienna the true cultural center of Europe. The rest of the world, and the United States in particular, benefited from the talent of those who were lucky to escape the Nazi onslaught. What the immigrés like the Galimirs brought with them and passed on to their students was that deep understanding of the European traditions, and especially the Second Vienna School and the modern French composers that was in their blood, and the lineage of their teachers that reached back to Beethoven and the First Vienna School. They are gone, but their recordings and the many students they taught and ensembles they coached carry the tradition forward.